Kia ora, talofa. I'm going to tell you a story, but this is no ordinary story. This is a talatu'u. A talatu'u is a story that I'm going to hand to you, and in turn you can hand on to your family or friends, or perhaps your children one day, and they can hand on to their children. Awe. Awe is the word that you're going to use as I tell this story, which makes it very, very special. You can say awe if you want me to continue the story. You can also say awe if you're feeling joy or you're feeling sad. Or quite simply, look at me, and when I put my hand on my chin like this, you can say awe. So, where do we start? From the beginning. This is a story about a time when everything changed. You wouldn't believe it. The year was 2020. Samoa had just recovered from a horrific few months of the measles epidemic that claimed the lives of so many children. Meanwhile, in Australia, bushfires raged and raged, destroying everything in its path. The fires were so extensive that from outer space, it looked like Australia was burning before our eyes. You see, tamariki, we woke up one morning and the sky was an eerie shade. The sun obscured by this cloud of smokes that had come across the moana. We didn't know then, but this was the beginning of the chaos. We stood upon the edge of the Waitakere cliffs and wondered, what else lays beyond the horizon? We had no idea then that this was just the beginning. But you know what? It all started gradually. There was news of an exotic wildlife market in a far, far away place. And in the background, the camera panned out and there were people wearing layers of plastic and masks on their faces. But I thought to myself, that's really far away. And then people started dying and there were many more that were hospitalized. Again, I thought, we are so safe here in New Zealand, so far removed from the danger. But then the news began to grow and spread, and it went from a little region to a country to a continent. It spread. Then we began to get used to a whole new language. COVID-19, vaccinations, isolation, vaccines, changes, always. And then it went from a market to a region to a continent, from Wuhan to Iran, and then in the most unexpected turn of events, lots of older people started dying in Italy, Germany, and France. Then mass graves were dug up in upstate New York, and it all seemed far too much. A terrible pandemic has gripped our globe. While our country did shut down borders fast, COVID-19 did accompany the travelers that came back to New Zealand, and it was now in our backyard. You know what? It did force us to stop. It grounded planes, it shut up shops, people lost jobs, and so much had changed, and it all seemed too much. And so it was to be that everyone, and I mean everyone, from Kaitaia to Bluff, from Tokelau to Niue to Chatham Islands, we all did something strange. We stopped. They formed bubbles, and most of us had to get accustomed to staying at home. and home, which has then become home, which is where we slept, where we worked, where we learned, where we yelled at children, where we had to grieve our loved ones that we've lost, where we had to learn to get along, and we just learned to stay home. The only people that were allowed to get out were those who were essential workers, who had to keep our hospitals open, the borders, our supermarkets, and to keep our essential services operating. But as terrible as that may seem, let me tell you this. The last time something terrible like this happened was actually not so long ago. It was back in the day when men and women went to war, and Kiwis waited, many, for news that never came. I suddenly realized we finally have something to talk about. We have something to connect to what they went through. They had it tough. It's interesting, like how far we've come, and yet, this is when we realize what we take for granted. Fast travel, going on holidays, ordering things online, ever-changing technology. And now we're really realizing that we were so reliant on all those things. But the other thing also that I wanted to mention was, for many of us, we finally had to learn some skills, like learning how to cook and learning to eat our own food. And we also learned to tolerate the people in our bubble and adapt to a whole new normal. But let me tell you something else, tamariki. The things that we actually took for granted were the things that we really wanted and missed during lockdown. Can you think of some things you would have missed during that time? Think about it. You're stuck at home. What would you have missed? Perhaps you miss your friends, your family. Well, that's fantastic. Well, aside from all those, this is what I missed: flour. You heard right, flour for baking and cooking. I tell you now, you wouldn't believe it. The sense of helplessness of having to go and walk all the way to the supermarket and queuing up outside because you had to line up 2 meters apart, and then you go step forward, stop, step forward, stop. But wait, do you stand on the line, or do you stand behind the line or in front of the line? What if the lady in front of you is like in front of the line and the guy in the pajamas behind you is uncertain? Goodness gracious, the decisions we had to make. I know. And then after a 30-minute slow walk, I get to the front of the queue and the guy from the supermarket is like, yeah, you can go in. So I step forward and I go pss, 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 clean the trolley, wipe it down, wash my hands, keep my mask on, and throw the rubbish in the bin. And in I go into the supermarket, run over to the flour aisle, nothing. Nothing there, nothing in the front, no flour anywhere. And all around me are people who are looking for the exact same thing. This actually reminds me. I went for a walk down sleepy Glen Eden, and I wandered into the dairy. I thought to myself, I'll just give it a try. So I went to the aisle where normally flour is, and there was nothing. So I walked back out, but I decided to just ask the shopkeeper whether they had it. So I was like, excuse me, do you have any flour? And he looked at me and he went, how much do you need? And I said, oh, whatever you have. And I was pleading, not realizing that he can't see the sadness in my face because I had a mask on. And he stepped to the back of the counter, and would you believe it? He grabs a bag of flour and places it on the counter. And it's so funny because I was actually thinking, is he gonna be like, you need to qualify for this flower? But no. What I found interesting was the flower had taken center stage next to the cigarettes and the corned beef. What a new normal. And it was such an exciting day because now I have flour to bake bread and pies and whatever I could Google online. It was a special, special day. All the men and women, bored to death with TikTok and Instagram, proceeded to bake, trying out recipes that they found online, rolling dough on clean surfaces. But wait, posting the evidence on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, cropping out the burnt bits, Zoom, filter. Yes, because back in my day, it didn't count if it wasn't online. Hashtag COVID-19, hashtag I'm so amazing, hashtag baking every day, hashtag lockdown. Like, share, love. Oh child, life was so tough back in the day. It reminded me so clearly that long before our time, another generation of Kiwis had queued up also, waiting for rations and grabbing what was left on shelves. And they had to make do with what was left. But you know what? Despite everything that was wrong and all the fear that surrounded us, let me tell you this, tamariki, it was one of the most precious experiences of our lives. That terrible pandemic might have wreaked havoc, but it was also the thing that united us and brought us together. Oh my goodness, I tell you, the silence was so wonderful. Walking down a normally very busy street, devoid of cars, passing cautiously around parents and children learning to ride bikes and chalking pictures on the sidewalk, hearing and seeing tui birds singing and dancing in the trees. It was such a special time. We also got to drop off food and share and help all those in our community that were vulnerable and needed the help. It was a time for Kiwis to reach out and be there for one another. In our homes, we had to learn to live with each other and get along, or at least we tried. We had to accept and be present. Compassion was the currency of the day. The lockdown really made me realize what was important. Being there for our loved ones, supporting those in need, being truly at peace with what we have, being present, reminding ourselves that we are so lucky and having an abundant supply of flour always. So children, I tell you now, you don't know how lucky you are. Life was tough back in my day. Awe.